We descended slowly inside our observation cage, hearts pounding, cameras rolling, and then it appeared. A colossal great white shark, covered in scars across its entire body, as if bearing the marks of ancient battles.
In 2003, off the southwestern coast of Australia, a research team attached a small tracking device to a healthy great white shark and watched her disappear into open water. 4 months later, that device washed up on a beach. The shark did not, and the data stored inside it described something that should not have been possible. A 500-pound apex predator. Nothing in the ocean is supposed to hunt one. But whatever was on the other end of that tag had swallowed her whole, and then driven nearly 2,000 feet straight down into the dark. Something ate her. And it would take scientists the better part of a decade to finally understand what. The shark that vanished. Before we uncover what really happened to this great white shark, make sure to subscribe, because the ocean still holds mysteries that science is only beginning to understand. The year is 2003. A research team is operating off the coast of southwestern Australia, running the first large-scale great white tagging project those waters have ever seen. Filmmaker Dave Riggs is there to document it. They pull up alongside a healthy 9-foot female, around 500 pounds. There is something about the way she moves in the water, a kind of ownership, a confidence that is not aggression, but something closer to certainty. Someone on the crew starts calling her Alpha. The name sticks. Hold on to those numbers for a moment. 9 feet, 500 pounds. This is not a juvenile, not an animal on the edge of its range, still figuring things out. This is a fully grown apex predator, the kind of creature that has occupied the top of the ocean's food chain for millions of years and has never once had to look over its shoulder. The device they attach to her is a data logger, small, rugged, designed to do exactly one job for months at a time without broadcasting a single signal. It records depth. It records the water temperature around the shark. It captures light levels and movement, second by second, and holds all of it internally. It is not talking to anyone. It just waits. Then, on a preset date, it detaches from the shark, floats to the surface, and transmits everything it collected up to a satellite. Scientists can then reconstruct where the animal went and what it experienced, provided the animal is still wearing it. Here is the thing you have to understand about that device. It is the only witness. No camera follows Alpha into the open ocean. No one watches. Whatever happens to her out there happens in total silence and total privacy. The only record that will ever exist is the one written inside that recorder. 4 months after tagging, it comes back. Not via satellite first, physically. It washes ashore roughly 2.5 miles from where it was attached. The data is recovered. The numbers go up on a screen. Riggs is in the room. Everyone is expecting the ordinary. Slow cruising patterns, temperature drifting gradually with depth, the wide, lazy loops of a big shark moving through familiar territory. That is not what the data says. What the recorder said. The tag shows a drop. Not a gradual dive, a plunge. Nearly 1,900 feet in minutes. And then the temperature reading does something that stops the entire project cold. 2 numbers. That is all it takes. And the moment Riggs understands what those 2 numbers mean together, this stops being a research study and becomes a question that will follow him for years. Before those numbers, I want to make sure you feel the full weight of what kind of animal we are actually talking about. Because I think most people carry some abstract sense that great whites are dangerous, without ever sitting with what that really means. A great white shark is not simply a large fish with efficient teeth. It is the result of millions of years of evolutionary pressure, refined by the ocean into something that operates at the outer edge of what biology allows. The largest individuals exceed 20 feet and weigh more than 5,000 pounds. Their sensory system can detect a single drop of blood, diluted into enormous volumes of water. Tiny organs clustered in the snout can feel the electrical pulse of a heartbeat buried in sand. In short bursts, they can cover water faster than you could process the threat. Their teeth are serrated, endlessly replaced, stacked in rows, so that when one breaks, the next simply rotates forward. This is the ocean's most refined hunting machine. Sit with that image for a moment. An animal that can smell a wound from far across open water, feel a heartbeat through solid seafloor, and close distance faster than instinct can respond. But here is the part most people skip past, and it matters more than the teeth. Being an apex predator is not about size or speed alone, it is about position. The definition of an apex predator is an animal that nothing hunts. Everything below it shapes its entire life around avoiding it. And above it, there is nothing. That is what apex means, the ceiling. For as long as marine science had been studying great whites, that was the model. Orcas had been observed harassing, and occasionally killing, great whites in a few documented locations. Large sharks sometimes clashed over carcasses, but an animal that hunted a fully grown great white deliberately, killed it cleanly, and consumed it as a meal, that was not in the model. That was not supposed to be possible, which is precisely why nobody in that room wanted to say out loud what Alpha's tag was telling them. The two numbers. The first number is depth. The tag dropped to nearly 1,900 feet. On its own, before anyone even considered anything else, that reading was already wrong. Great whites are not deep water animals. This is a species built for the bright, productive layers near the surface, the coastal shallows. The upper zone where sunlight reaches and prey is dense. The overwhelming majority of their lives happens within the first 1,000 feet. That is their world. A sudden vertical plunge to 1,900 feet is not a foraging dive. It is not curiosity. When a tag logs that kind of rapid, extreme descent in minutes, the list of possible explanations gets very short, very fast. Alpha almost certainly was not diving on her own. Something was taking her down. Something that could reach 1,900 feet quickly, powerfully, and apparently without much effort. And think about where that is. 1,900 feet down, sunlight is gone entirely. The pressure is crushing dozens of times what you feel at the surface. It is cold, it is black, it is silent. This is not somewhere a coastal hunter wanders. Something dragged Alpha into a place that was never hers, did it in minutes, left no sound, no trace, no witness. Sit with that, because then came the second number, temperature. At 1,900 feet off the Australian coast, the ocean is cold, not cold water cold. Deep, crushing, genuinely frigid cold. Water at that depth sits around 46 degrees Fahrenheit. If the tag had simply popped off and sunk to that depth, or if Alpha had died and drifted down with it still attached, 46 degrees is exactly what you would expect to see. Cold and getting colder as depth increased. That is not what it logged. The temperature went up. It climbed from around 46 degrees to a sustained 78 degrees Fahrenheit, a jump of more than 30 degrees. And it did not spike briefly, the way a dying sensor might. It held stable at 78 degrees, 1,900 feet down, in water that should have been close to freezing. There is essentially one explanation for that. A tag does not log a warm, stable 78 degrees at extreme depth in frigid ocean unless it is no longer in the ocean. It was inside something with a warm interior. Something alive, that had swallowed Alpha, Tag, and all, and then carried her downward with the meal still inside. Picture that the way Riggs had to. Something out there swallowed a 500-pound great white shark whole, dove nearly 1,900 feet, and then simply carried on. And not one person at the surface saw a thing. No fin, no disturbance, no photograph, no witness. The only reason any of us know this happened is that a piece of plastic washed onto a beach 4 months later, carrying the receipt. Riggs has described reading and rereading the data, unable to accept that the numbers were real. He could not make them say anything other than what they said. The shark was eaten. The question started there. The suspects. Once the team accepted what the data was telling them, they began working through every candidate the ocean could offer, and watched each theory collapse in turn. First suspect, the orca. We know orcas can kill great whites. Off South Africa especially, orcas have developed a technique that is almost clinical, flipping a shark upside down, which locks it into a paralyzed trance, then opening the body cavity to extract the nutrient-dense liver. Efficient, cold, impressive by any measure. At first glance, the orca seemed to fit. An orca gut, full of warm prey and a swallow of cold seawater, could plausibly produce something near that 78-degree reading. The temperature did not eliminate it, but the depth did. Orcas are not deep divers. They hunt near the surface. Even their most extreme dives fall well short of 1,900 feet. An orca does not casually drag prey to that depth and linger. The behavior does not match the body. The orca stayed on the board, but it slid down it. Second suspect, the sperm whale. Here is an animal that genuinely lives in the deep. Sperm whales chase squid to depths of several thousand feet, far deeper than Alpha ever went. The largest males stretch past 60 feet and weigh over 100,000 pounds. A sperm whale's throat could accommodate a 9-foot shark without difficulty. On depth, no problem. But the temperature cut against it in the opposite direction. Sperm whales are warm-blooded mammals, running internal temperatures around 97 degrees to 99 degrees. 78 degrees is far too cool for the inside of one, and their entire feeding strategy is built around soft-bodied prey in the deep, not large surface predators. Wrong temperature, wrong diet. Out. Large sharks, not large enough. Squid, cold-blooded. And as that list exhausted itself, the team found themselves staring at a possibility that was somehow both completely obvious and almost too strange to say aloud. The predator revealed. What if the animal that ate the great white was another great white? Not a slightly larger rival that won a brawl. Not a territorial collision that turned fatal. A great white of a size that most marine biologists had never seriously put on the table. A shark so large that a 9-foot, 500-pound great white represented to it a meal. And they did not guess their way to that conclusion. They reasoned it. The temperature was the key. Most sharks are cold-blooded. Their internal temperature matches the surrounding water. End of story. But great whites are not most sharks. They belong to the mackerel shark family and carry a rare adaptation called regional endothermy. Using a specialized network of blood vessels, they trap and recycle the heat generated by their own muscles, keeping their core temperature, their eyes, their brain, and their digestive system meaningfully warmer than the water around them. It is the thing that keeps them fast and lethal even in cold conditions. Now follow where that leads. An average great white stomach might run somewhere around 65 to 70 degrees. And in deep, frigid water, even that might be generous. 78 degrees is warmer than a typical mid-sized great white would produce. But a significantly larger great white changes the entire equation. More body means more muscle. More muscle means more heat generated. More mass means that heat is retained far more effectively against the cold pressing in from outside. Inside the gut of a truly enormous great white, a stable 78 degrees is not a contradiction. It is exactly what you would expect to find. The reading that had looked like a glitch suddenly pointed at a single kind of animal. The depth fit, too. Once researchers let go of the assumption that great whites stay shallow, the picture cleared. These sharks have been tracked diving past 3,000 feet in open ocean. 1,900 feet is extreme, but it is well within reach of a very large individual. That left one question. How large does a great white need to be to swallow a 9-foot shark whole? Researchers studying this kind of predation estimate roughly twice the length of the prey. Run that number against what the tag recorded, and you land on a predator somewhere around 16 feet long, weighing more than 2 tons. A shark sitting right at the upper edge of what the species is believed to reach, and perhaps slightly past it. If you let yourself reconstruct the moment, the picture is brief and merciless. A larger shadow rising from below, the way great whites attack, fast, committing from underneath. A single strike, and then the long descent into dark water, with the meal still inside. The tag did not record the ambush. It recorded the aftermath, the plunge, the warmth. The aftermath is more than enough to tell you how it began. What else are we wrong about? Here is where it stops being arithmetic and starts being genuinely unsettling. There are credible accounts, going back decades, from fishermen, naval crews, and researchers across the last century, describing great whites of 20 feet or more. For a long time, science filed those away as exaggeration, stretched memory, the inevitable inflation of a close encounter retold over years. But what if they were not exaggerated? What if the ocean holds great whites of a size we have simply never managed to tag, measure, or photograph? Animals living far out in the deep open water, away from coastlines, vessels, and the shallow bays where almost all of our observation happens. The longer you sit with it, the more sense it makes that we would have missed them. The largest, oldest females would be the rarest animals in an already rare species, roaming thousands of miles of open water and surfacing for no one. A shark like that could live a 50-year life and never once drift within sight of a research boat. We did not fail to find her because she was hiding. We failed because we were not looking in her part of the ocean. The team's conclusion pointed to a female great white of exceptional size. Females of the species grow considerably larger than males. The biggest confirmed individuals approach 20 feet and weigh over 4,000 pounds. And when researchers laid Alpha's recorder alongside tracking data from other large white sharks moving through those same waters, it aligned. Body temperatures logged from bigger animals matched the warmth recorded inside the tag. The depths, the ranges, the behavioral patterns, all of it was consistent with an enormous female great white that had never been formally documented. She had been there the entire time, moving through those waters, doing exactly what apex predators do. And one morning in 2003, she crossed paths with a 9-foot great white and treated it like breakfast, then dropped nearly 1,900 feet into the dark to finish the meal where no one would ever see. I do not know how to make that less alarming. So, I am not going to try. Here is what almost nobody talks about, because the headline is just too good on its own. A giant great white eating another great white whole. That sentence alone is enough to make someone quietly cancel a beach reservation and rethink every decision that ever put them near open water. Entirely fair. I am not judging anyone. But the headline is the least disturbing part. Once the team confirmed what happened to Alpha, They did what good scientists always do when something impossible lands in their lap. They went back through the record, hunting for patterns they had previously dismissed. And what they found extends far beyond one morning off Australia. Great white predation on great whites is not a freak accident. It is not a one-in-a-million collision of two animals in the wrong place at the wrong time. It is a documented behavior, and the evidence has been sitting in plain sight for years. Marine biologists have long known that great whites are cannibalistic. Larger individuals dominate smaller ones at feeding sites. Juveniles are genuinely at risk from the adults sharing their water. The behavior even starts before birth. Developing pups consume their unhatched siblings in the womb. A strategy so well established, it has a name in the scientific literature. Dead great whites have turned up bearing massive bite wounds, arc, spacing, serration, that could only have come from the jaws of another great white. And it is not only the dead ones. Researchers and divers have photographed living great whites carrying old, healed-over scars in that same unmistakable pattern. Sharks that were bitten by one of their own and somehow survived. Every one of those scars is a story that happened out of sight. A violent encounter, recorded only in living tissue. In recent years, researchers tracking a pregnant porbeagle, a smaller relative of the great white, recovered data suggesting the animal had been attacked and very likely consumed by a larger predator, with a great white among the prime suspects. Described as the first documented predation of a porbeagle anywhere in the world. The lesson keeps repeating across studies and oceans. Being a large, dangerous shark does not place you safely at the top. It just means that whatever eats you has to be larger and more dangerous still. Taken one case at a time, you can explain it away. A territorial confrontation, a scuffle over a carcass, two big animals having a bad day in close proximity. Scientists are trained to resist dramatic conclusions from isolated data points, and they are right to be, but lay the whole body of evidence end to end, stretch it across decades, drop Alpha's tag on top of it, and you cannot call all of it aggression. The picture that emerges is something else. The very largest great whites do not just compete with smaller ones. Sometimes they eat them. Apex predation happening inside a single apex species. The food chain everyone assumed ended at the great white does not end there at all. It keeps climbing into a band of size that marine science has barely begun to study. Which means the chart we all drew in our heads, great white at the top, everything else arranged neatly beneath, is wrong. And if we got that wrong about the most studied, most filmed, most famous predator in the entire ocean, the next question is the one that should keep marine biologists awake. What else are we wrong about? There is a reason this stayed hidden so long, and it comes down to one fact. We have barely looked. The open ocean is almost incomprehensibly vast. The Pacific alone covers around 60 million square miles. All the world's oceans together reach past 100 million square miles of water, of which we have meaningfully explored only a fraction. The deep, open ocean, everything below roughly 1,000 feet, is, for all practical purposes, invisible to us. Whatever happens down there, we were not there to witness it. And it gets worse. Even when we do study great whites, the numbers are small. The global population sits in the low thousands. The individuals ever fitted with a working tag represent a fraction of that. We are drawing confident conclusions about an entire species from a few dozen animals. Worse still, there is a systematic bias in which animals get tagged. Researchers work where sharks come close to shore. Those tend to be the younger, smaller individuals. The 20-foot females, the ones capable of what was done to Alpha, live far out in deep water, where the boats are not. It is like trying to understand wild elephants by only ever studying calves near the fence. Stack that up, and the consequences become real.